Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, June 12th, 2025. All managers are here except for Manager Maxwell. Before asking for a motion to approve the agenda, I'll just note that we will be taking up items 12.1 and 12.2 at the very end. With that change, is there a motion to adopt?
Move approval.
Thank you, Manager Miller. Second for Manager Hejmati. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? On the consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes of the May 22nd board meeting. And that is the only item on the consent agenda this evening. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Manager Hejmati, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Sando, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I want to thank Mr. Smith for letting us know that there have been changes to the open meeting law, and I've asked him to give us a summary of what those changes are, and I suggest that we look forward to looking at our policy regarding open meetings and adapt according to the new statute. If you would, Louis.
Thank you, Madam President, managers. The legislature amended the law. Before this amendment, you could participate in a meeting remotely through interactive technology if you were in a location that was noticed and in a publicly accessible place. So you'll recall managers in different circumstances. There was a separate basis for up to 3 times a year participating remotely when you had medical advice from a healthcare professional that it was not for your or personal health, family health reasons, not appropriate for you to be in a public setting. Or if you're a member of the military and you were on a drill. The legislature removed all of those constraints to remote participation. So now, effective the day after enactment, which was May 24th, the bodies like this Board of Managers can participate remotely so long as there is at least one member of the board present here, that all members can see and hear each other, and that the meeting is noticed to advise the public that members may be participating remotely. So because those changes have been made, that doesn't necessarily mean that every governing body must conduct their meetings that way within those confines. And so some bodies may decide that they still value in-person participation or want to promote or favor in-person participation. So that's up to the board, and you can kind of work through that as a matter of policy. But you do have this change that allows remote participation, and it no longer needs to be in a publicly accessible and noticed place.
Thank you. Manager Loftus, can you report on Operations and Programs Committee?
Yes, thank you, President White. We met earlier this evening and we had a discussion about the 2026 budget. There have been a couple of refinements in the past month, and the majority of the discussion was on personnel and improvement plan. And the budget is still shaping nicely thanks to staff efforts. And the board's pleased to let the public know that less than a 1% increase in the budget. Proposed change in the levy. A lot of hard work from our staff to accomplish that. And then we also had a permit briefing where our department had notified the board of upcoming issues, hearings, meetings.
All right, thank you. We, of course, had that really nice retreat last week with the CAC and staff, and a number of us were there, and I thought I would just let other managers weigh in on what their comments were about that. Field trip, not a retreat, a field trip.
Yeah, I was there. It was wonderful. We explored Lake Nokomis via swan boat, unique and also informative. And really, James and all the staff were phenomenal and represented the district very well. So it was not only fun, but it was informative. And there were a couple of pauses as planes flew by. But otherwise, it was about as smooth as it could be. There was rain, the weather held out. It was fun, so thank you.
I'd like to second that. The whole staff was there almost, and very well organized. Thank the staff very much.
Yeah, it was very well put together. I appreciate the outreach team and what a good job they did. And the way in which they structured it was really effective. You know, we went out in these swan boats and in small groups, and small group people got to know each other, which was part of the goal of doing that. And they had a trivia, which I thought was very interesting and very informative, told us what we knew and what we didn't know, you know, and I realized how little I knew. You know, that was helpful. And I really enjoyed, appreciated R&M showing us one of their, field units out there that measured the level and the sampling the water and so on. I mean, I see it on, I see the data that you guys bring, but to be actually go and look at the equipment and see what it looks like was really helpful. I thought that was a lot of fun. And then the project, we also got a briefing on a project. Gabe gave us an overview of a project that we're doing through Minneapolis, city of Minneapolis, and again, I'm on the steering committee, but to actually go and physically look at it and to be shown what the pieces are was wonderful. I really enjoyed that very much. So it was a very successful get together that was done. So thanks to the outreach team for doing such a great job. Appreciate it.
I believe you were overly modest. Didn't your team get 100% on the trivia? I think so.
You know why? It's because Mike Heyman was on our team. We cheated. He knew all the answers.
That's an advantage. That's great.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
It's the first time I ever saw your face red.
I really loved the chance to network, and I now know which superpowers people want, which is really important.
Yeah.
And seeing the project area was great, being able to visualize that meadow area. And who could object to ice cream? I like that too.
Yeah.
Thank you all for putting that together for us. And that, of course, was the third iteration of the training or the orientation for the CAC, and chance to get to know the new members too. So appreciate that. The upcoming meetings are shown in the agenda, including our regularly scheduled committee and board meeting. Also, the summer tour for Minnesota Watersheds is the last week of June. Manager Maxwell will represent us at the Metro Watershed Quarterly Meeting, which is virtual. And Manager Loftus will be at the CAC meeting on July 16th. Let's move then to item 11.1, Resolution 25035. Ms. Baker presenting.
Tonight I'll be requesting board action to authorize proposals for the downtown. Start with refresh of the long partnership roadmap. Then I'll introduce the potential for us to. There we go. I'll introduce the potential for us to advance a grant-funded feasibility analysis for stormwater in downtown Long Lake. And then after discussion and answering any questions, I'll ask the board to support the release of an RFP. So to begin with a recap of the Long Lake sub-watershed history, within the 12 square miles of the sub-watershed, we've had a strong history of partnership and investments to improve Long Lake with the cities of Long Lake, Orono, and Medina. In the 1990s, MCWD worked with city partners to implement a suite of projects to improve water quality in Long Lake, including the construction of 2 regional stormwater ponds to treat runoff from the northern watershed, which are Deer Hill Pond and County Road 6 Pond, which you're familiar with. The enhancement of existing stormwater ponds and shoreline restoration at Nelson Lakeside Park to treat runoff from the western downtown area, and then also alum treatment in the lake. This past decade has brought us into a new era of partnership. Some of the highlights include in 2016, cities passed a resolution of partnership to work together to pursue water quality projects and grant funding in coordination with Long Lake Waters Association. And in 2018, MCWD was invited into that partnership, and we secured $112,000 in grant funding from Bowser for a subwatershed assessment. And all of that work ultimately culminated in the Long Lake Creek Partnership Roadmap that you are all familiar with today. The roadmap, completed over the last couple of years in collaboration with the cities and Long Lake Waters Association, integrates local priorities for development, infrastructure, and parks and open space, and it identified 34 potential projects for implementation. It breaks down the watershed into 5 manageable units, where we identify water quality issues and drivers of those issues, and identify a range of strategies and project opportunities to meet water quality goals. The roadmap prioritizes projects that address the root causes of water impairments, and we categorize these projects into types by order of best practice operation. First is regional stormwater treatment, which is recommended as the first step to cost-effectively treat large drainage areas within the subwatershed. And County Road 6, again, is a great example of that work. Second, the roadmap identifies opportunity zones where other landscape projects could be implemented to reduce pollutant loading, often in parallel with regional treatment. And then the third strategy is addressing internal loading through alum dosing after the landscape projects have been advanced. So the RFP for the feasibility study that I'm here to talk about tonight focuses on the downtown management unit within the Long Lake subwatershed. The downtown catchment totals 518 acres that span from the Orono schools here on the west side, on the far west side, to about Red Rooster and the historic downtown area on the east side of town. This management unit area has nearly 4 times the volume of nutrient loading per unit area compared to other management units draining to Long Lake. And this is largely due to the high amount of impervious surfaces in the commercial industrial corridor between Old Highway 12 here and then the bypass. So the roadmap identified Holbrook Park as a potential regional treatment opportunity. Because of the high nutrient loading in this management area, district staff, with authorization from the board and with support of Long Lake, chased grant dollars to fund feasibility for regional treatment. And in 2022, the district was awarded with $175,000 from Bowser to conduct a feasibility study at Holbrook Park. With County Road 6 project completing design and preparing to go out to bid this summer, we thought it was time to pick up this project again and get something else in the queue for the subwatershed. So conversations with the city of Long Lake resulted in the decision that the district would take the lead on implementing feasibility. And after a site walk with the city and further examining wetland condition, storm sewers, ponds, and flow paths, we realized that all of the commercial industrial corridor and on the north side of the bypass and all of the residential streets and Holbrook Park on the south of the bypass all kind of drain to a single retention basin just south of City Hall before it flows through downtown into Nelson Lakeside Pond and then to Long Lake. So over the past couple of months, staff have refamiliarized themselves with the roadmap project recommendations within the downtown management unit in addition to Holbrook Park. For example, the area behind the Public Works facility is right here. Nelson Lakeside Pond, and then Daniel Street, which goes into Kenobi Pond. And we realized that with this grant-funded feasibility, we could consider a much greater area beyond Holbrook Park and roll in multiple project locations into one contract. So we've shifted our project focus to include not just Holbrook Park, but additional project areas identified through the roadmap, as well as other potential areas we've identified through our site walks and discussions with city staff. And we've separated these project areas into kind of 3 buckets: the industrial corridor, Holbrook Park, and then the surrounding ravines and wetlands, and then what we're calling Lakeview area, which includes the basin that the other areas kind of drain to, as well as the daylighted stream through downtown that outlets into Nelson Lakeside Pond. So by bringing all these projects together into a single management unit assessment, the feasibility study will be able to compare project opportunities against each other and enable prioritization based on project impact and cost effectiveness, much like how we're approaching the Minnehaha Creek Parkway in Minneapolis. So what do we hope to achieve with this feasibility study? Some of the deliverables we expect to receive from our future consultant team include project identification and evaluation, which will include a comparative analysis of all identified project opportunities, both new and existing, and a recommendation of which of those projects merit advancement to the next step, where the selected projects would then be developed into a feasibility level concept designs, which will serve as technical and procedural basis to advance into full project design at a future date. We will also expect a scan to identify potential permitting and other technical challenges or other barriers to project implementation. And then finally, a cost-benefit analysis for each project opportunity, including an analysis on ease of procuring funding. After feasibility, we'll meet with the City of Long Lake to coordinate project implementation and then develop a funding strategy with them. So pending board approval, we plan to release this RFP for the downtown Long Lake area next Monday, June 16th. We'll have an informational meeting on June 26th, and we'll keep applications or proposals open until July 16th. From there, we'll review the proposals, conduct the interviews, and then select a consultant to present to the board, which we'll do on the August 28th board meeting, and we hope to start the feasibility shortly thereafter. And with that, staff recommends approving Resolution 25-035, authorizing staff to release a RFP for the downtown Long Lake feasibility study.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, second. Manager Hejmati. Any questions for Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Yes.
What kind of a timeline are we talking about on this feasibility? Are we talking about a 6 months, a year, 2 years? What are we talking about?
We're estimating it'll take about 6 months, start to finish, with hearing all the let's go with 6 months, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, I understand, but I just want to get a ballpark sense. Okay, and during the 6 months, do you foresee, you're going to be we're going to be doing the feasibility study, and we're going to be working with Long Lake, with the policymakers and their staff. Do you foresee any turnover so that in their staff or their policymakers, because if people change, then everything gets slowed down. So that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Are the people we're engaging with going to be stable through the 6 month period? That may be a better way of saying it. Are they going to be there so that when we start it and we finish it, the same people who started it are the people who finish it, so that we're not slowed down by having to bring new people up to speed?
Yeah, Manager Hejmati, Maya might know the exact timeline for when each of our city council members have kind of a renewal or turnover. But based on what I know about the council, I know the mayor has been there since 2018, and there have been some other council members who have been here for a while, and they seem very supportive of us and our work. James and I went to their city council meeting on May 20th and presented, and they supported the partnership as well as supported this work and this feasibility study. So it is fresh in their minds, and I think they will be, most of them, if not all, will be there in 6 months' time.
Okay.
And the city administrator or the city manager
Right.
is also supportive of our work, and I don't foresee him.
Don't foresee
either,
any
but who
difficulties.
knows?
Okay, good, good. Sounds like you've really established a good rapport with them and trust, so that even if somebody did change, the new person can be brought into the fold and educated, and the project will continue. That's kind of what I'm gathering from the way you're talking right now. Okay.
Manager Miller?
I'm not familiar with this project at all. I couldn't figure out where the flow was.
Or the flow of water.
Yeah,
So this is the kind of downtown industrial corridor. These are some wetlands north of Old Highway 12.
Sure.
And so most of the water kind of goes through storm sewers, through this kind of highly impervious area here. And then here is mostly residential, and with a couple of stormwater ponds here.
no, so it flows into the creek?
There's a small little daylighted creek. I don't even know if it has a name right here, but it flows into Long Lake. This is Long Lake right here.
Okay, so our other project that we did before is not involved with this, it's further down.
Manager Miller, yeah, that's right. So I don't know if you've got a map that shows the whole sub-watershed somewhere. Further east. This is on the west side of Long Lake. So if you go to the next map, Rachel. This one's fine. So our County Road 6 pond, you can see is directly north, that one.
Yeah.
Orange dot on the north right there that Rachel's, that's the County Road 6 pond, and that receives all the drainage from the northern two tributaries to Long Lake.
No, I'm thinking of the other one that we,
Yep. And then
south.
south of Long
Okay.
Lake is Long Lake Creek, and where we worked with Met Council Environmental Services just south of the highway, Rachel, right there, just south of Long Lake, to restore that basin. And this project is in the highly impervious western area that drains east into Long Lake, and actually drains through old projects that has the Nelson Parkside ponds that we have a responsibility for. So the aim of the feasibility study is to look at there's those ponds over in Stone Bay and Orono. They flow south into a big Mindot pond. It picks up that drainage by Holbrook Park. It flows through a small channel in Nelson Parkside ponds. It's to treat this, look at the whole drainage for the whole city, figure out how it all works together, what the opportunities are for new projects or.
Thank you.
Anything else? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Baker. Moving now to Resolution 25036, Mr. Sherman presenting.
Good evening, President White, Board of Managers. I'm here this evening with authorization to amend the Phase 2 design contract with HDR for the 325 Blake Road Restoration and Redevelopment Project. I'm going to start with just a little bit of background on Cottageville Park and Gateway to Greenway, and then get into the contract amendment itself before stepping through next steps and timeline, then to authorization. So over the last several months, the board has been discussing what we've been calling the managed separation from Alatus and what our options to pivot are. And we identified one specific component of the strategy as being breaking off the Gateway to Greenway as a separate project that we could advance while taking the time to consider our options on the main Blake Road site and Nature Play. And we came to this decision. I gave a bit of a briefing on this last month, but as a refresher, the Gateway is well positioned to advance as a standalone project, given its geographic location across the road from the rest of the project. It's highly visible, so as we get into construction, people will see that work is ongoing. And I think maybe most importantly, it actually will complete all of Cottageville Park to the north and west of Lake Street. So we'll still have Nature Play to consider, but we will have a complete, kind of a complete Cottageville Park, which has been a goal for many years. I wanted to step through a little bit of a timeline for Cottageville Park itself. We spent a lot of time talking about Blake Road, but wanted to give a little bit of history on Cottageville Park, which we've spent less time discussing. All the way back in 2010, the district acquired parcels for the expansion of Cottageville Park, including 415 Blake Road, which is where the future Gateway will be located. And at that time, the district and the city of Hopkins entered a cooperative agreement to design and construct Cottageville Park, which occurred in 2016. The two remnant parcels, now the Gateway and Nature Play, were paused for advancement based on some ongoing road construction and Met Council lift station projects at the time, with the goal of advancing those in the coming years. And as we geared up to do Blake Road, it made sense for contracting and design efficiencies and consistency to go ahead and roll those remaining Cottageville parcels into Blake Road, but they really were always kind of considered as part of the Cottageville project. Fast forward a few years to 2020, and the district and Hopkins executed a new cooperative agreement for the development of 325 Blake Road, which included those remaining Cottageville parcels. And at that around the same time, the district executed a design contract with HDR, and to fulfill that cooperative agreement, again, rolled in the design of what became Nature Play and Gateway to Greenway. As we progressed through that contract, again, in fulfillment of that cooperative agreement, in June of 2022, and again in February of 2023, district staff presented our Cottageville designs to the Hopkins Park Board, which reviewed it and ultimately recommended to the City Council that those designs should be approved. On May 11th of 2023, the district board approved final design. We also secured a conditional permit for the Gateway to Greenway, which we'll need to refresh as the timeline has expired on that, but we went through the permitting process on our end, and also approved a project and maintenance agreement with the city of Hopkins that guided the construction and future operations and maintenance of all of Cottageville Park. And then 5 days later, the Hopkins City Council voted in concurrence with the final design of Cottageville, and also approved that same project and maintenance agreement. And at the time, the intention had been to move into construction relatively quickly. However, we all know that the project has since sat in limbo due to development delays until March of this year, when the board directed the issuance of a notice of termination for the purchase agreement, which has unlocked the opportunity to advance the project. So I just wanted to, again, I know I showed a few of these slides last month, but now that we're really focused in on just the Gateway, I wanted to kind of remind the board of the design intent and some of the specific project.
You got a weather
After
service.
watching
Okay.
the weather all week, I'm just going to say, like, my heart
Yeah.
almost.
I guess we're on a low level, so we're
Yeah.
safe with what's
Are
ever.
we okay? We don't need shelter in place?
Quick, run upstairs.
We'll all go together.
80-mile-an-hour winds.
Okay. So the Gateway parcel kind of sits at the intersection of Lake Street and Blake Road. And so a lot of the design here was sort of an attempt to mitigate some of the traffic noise so that people still had an enjoyable experience in taking advantage of existing grades and constructed grades to try to separate seating areas as much as possible from the road. Again, the large oval, which was planted with native pollinator species, reflects what you can see over in the existing Cottageville Park, underneath which is, of course, the stormwater pipe gallery. This design allows for future installation of a large public art piece if that's something that either the board or city at some point desires, but it also functions as is as a place for pollinator species, some uplit trees, as well as providing a seating wall that kind of goes around there and provides that separation from traffic. The pergola is another unique structure to this project. There's swing seats there, which provide really nice, unique view of the creek, as well as over into the activity and plantings on the other side of the creek in Cottageville Park. And finally, we've added some, which we'll get into, some other architectural details, which is, again, kind of branding this as the entryway into the greenway, all the way down to Methodist Hospital. This is just an aerial view, and again, this would be sort of if you're hovering in a very low hot air balloon on the other side of Minnehaha Creek, giving you a view of trying to figure out what
No, I like
what
that. A
elevation this is
landing or
at.
taking
And here's a bit of a
It's next year's field trip.
we thought swan boats were fun. So again, reminder, this is not as a separate project, this is not really a water resources project, but of course we've tried to integrate where we can thoughtful stormwater treatment. So these rain gardens are designed to treat rainfall that occurs on this project site itself. And again, some seating options all throughout the gateway. View. A little bit washed out here, the colors, but you can see that we've branded the top of the pergola with Minnehaha Creek, so if anyone from street level can't actually see down to the creek, a visual indication that there is a natural resource here that would be parking. Another view of the swing seats and what we were calling a wetland fringe. So there wasn't, again, not a lot of room for a large restoration, but where we can, we've introduced the appropriate sort of vegetative species. Not a colorful rendering, but here you can see the decorative pavement. The intention is to bid it out with large granite pavers that are engraved with pretty much a full map of the watershed, all the way down to Mississippi. And that would be underneath the pergola. So either you could kind of walk along different areas, or if you're look down and place yourself in Cottageville Park where that exists, all watershed. And then finally at night, we incorporated some strategic lighting here to, again, recognizing that there is a neighborhood and some housing over there. So we've kind of tried to balance how much ambient light this creates with kind of wanting to create a unique perspective on the pergola. And again, not visible here so much, but along the seat walls, there's also lighting incorporated. So it'd be the intention is for it to be a safe area if people stop by even at night. And again, kind of demonstrate to passersby that the creek is down there. Mike actually did a little bit of my work for me during the CIP discussion. talking about costs. In the chart right here, you're seeing the opinion of probable cost when we reached 100% design. That's that 5.7 million. That's for the entire project. Of course, that number is now 2 years out of date. At that time, actually a little bit before, our last kind of broken out estimate for the gateway was $700,000, and that's the number that referenced has been carried forward in the by the time and this will kind of get into why we have some work to do to break out this project. By the time we got to final design, we were no longer talking about gateway, nature play, these different areas as separate budgets. Everything had been rolled together because it was one integrated project. So that's why our latest probable cost came at 60%. That's what was carried. I also did want to note, and there was some questions at my last briefing on this regarding the status of a maintenance agreement and a project agreement. So we dug that back out of our files and reviewed it. And as I mentioned back in May 2023, when we approved the project design, we also approved a consolidated project agreement for Cottageville Park. There had been several versions of agreements, different amendments, and in an effort to get everything kind of streamlined, we worked with legal counsel and MLM to pull together one project agreement that dealt with everything from the stormwater pipe gallery to the future nature play gateway parcels. And again, City of Hopkins has also approved this. This also accounts for the cross easements that we'll need. And without getting into too much detail, it's about a 30 or 40 page document, but in general, we have it divided up how we typically do, where we're in charge of any sort of riparian vegetation maintenance. The city takes on the typical kind of park structure maintenance, snow removal, that sort of thing. The one exception is if there's replacement needed of granite pavers. So if there's any sort of chipping or re-sandblasting needed, that would be an obligation of the district. Not so relevant tonight, but just remind the board, the other exception was the pedestrian bridge that would connect. Those were district obligations for replacement, but Hopkins would still do sort of typical park maintenance. So moving into the contract amendment itself, this is just sort of illustrative again to remind everyone that we had final construction documents, drawings, specifications for the entire project. And so now the task at hand is to pull out everything except for the gateway. While we're doing that, we also, in order to minimize the number of new amendments that would need to be brought forward and to try to forecast everything that's going to be needed to bring it from repackaging the design all the way through construction. Again, as Mike mentioned, we went ahead and had HDR also scope out and budget what they think it would take to not only separate out the construction package, but also support the district in bidding and review, and then do construction services, so all of the monitoring and everything all the way through construction. And I'm going to break this out a little bit so everyone can see where the dollars and hours are actually allocated per task. But just wanted to note that as we get into construction, we want to avoid any delays and having to come back to the board, have amendments or have changes to this. So that's why we've tried to build, we've worked with HDR to make sure that we build in the hours that we reasonably expect would be needed to account for any addenda throughout during a somewhat complex construction. So the first task, which would begin fairly immediately, would be starting to separate out this construction package. And that includes separating out all the drawings. So again, we have probably 100-ish pages of construction drawings. A lot of those overlap between different components of the project. So we'd be pulling all of that CAD line work out just for Gateway to Greenway, then matching up our full project manual specifications just to that Gateway to Greenway. We also, as I mentioned, our last cost estimate for the project as a whole was in 2023, and our last cost estimate for the Gateway specifically was even a little bit before that. So in order to make sure that we're able to really look at the bids that are coming in with an eye towards what it should cost today to construct the Greenway, HDR is also going to recalculate all the construction quantities and give an updated cost estimate of what we should expect to see. President White.
Go ahead.
Did HDR give you an understanding of that 40 hours project management and startup? You don't have to
Okay.
technical
Yeah,
answer, but just
yeah,
like
no, I
a
was,
general, I mean, they've been the consultant the whole time, right?
Yep.
So is this a different
Yeah, so it's
project?
yeah, so and I should note, so basically what we decided to do to keep things, I think, as neat as possible is we have an existing project management task that's ongoing right now. That's what we've sort of referred to that as the bridging task. Once development stalled and we needed some dollars to kind of carry through between now and bidding out the project, we also have a bid support task for the project as a whole. And we've set those aside to retain those dollars and tasks for the kind of the main part of the project. Everything that we're seeing here, we just moved into a comprehensive set of tasks and budgets just for the Gateway, and we're not going to touch the dollars that have already been assigned to.
And separated out from.
Exactly. So this is, so we'll retain, I do have numbers somewhere, but I think we had about $25,000 in this bridging task, which about half remains. And then we have about another, I think, 17,000-ish to bid out the rest of the project. So we're leaving those untouched and separate. Yeah, but that's a good question. I'm not just saying that. That is good. It's a good question.
Where'd you hear that?
Yeah. Second task is bid support. So once we have a finalized construction package, this is to get all the documents uploaded onto our bidding website. We'll have a pre-bid meeting where contractors can attend. There's a process where, if there's questions on our drawings or specifications, we have hours allocated for. And I should note, this is both HDR and Damon Farber. These are their combined hours. The scope of work breaks out who's doing what. But generally, the hours are allocated about 50-50. I think that really kind of reflects that Gateway in particular is pretty heavy on landscape architecture. There's no large stormwater facility at this point. So things like the pergola require structural engineering. We have custom lighting, which requires electrical engineering. So some of those are taken care of by HDR. Some of that is. And that will take us all the way through tabulating bids and getting a recommendation. And then the final task, which actually makes up a large part of this overall budget is construction services. And this is any sort of engineering services that are needed during design. So this will be construction observation, having HDR and Damon Farber staff on site periodically on a scheduled basis, make sure that construction is proceeding according to plans. When we do have specialty items like the engraving of granite, there's shop drawings that would be coming in that would get reviewed. Certain items are getting staked by Damon Farber to make sure that location. And then, of course, at the end of construction, creating record drawings. Any updates that we would need to the operations and maintenance manual at that time would get rolled in as well. We don't anticipate any major changes, but the again, that project agreement that we have with Hopkins does require us to work with Hopkins if there's any significant changes to the design that would also work its way.
Question?
Manager Miller?
I have no idea whether this is reasonable or not. Do we have our engineer or anybody look at these proposed activities and costs?
President White, Manager Miller, you mean our district engineer or?
Yeah, or somebody, you know.
Well, I mean, Mike and I went back and forth several times with HDR. I also did review several previous scopes of work for construction services, Arden Park and Wasserman, to make sure that these costs were generally in line. From that review, I'd say these costs are slightly more expensive, and I think, again, that's because we do have hours for both landscape architects and engineers, which I don't know, that's not always the case, that there would be so many landscape architects allocated percent of the overall contract. We did, from that review, the initial numbers for the bidding support task came in high, and we worked with HDR to bring those down to a level that we thought was appropriate for how many hours we've seen past projects take to bid and those bids. So I think, you know, again, I think that there's additional hours in there because of the dual specialties involved. But
Mr. Haven?
We've certainly reviewed this scope compared to other projects. We didn't look at it. I would say the other thing to consider when we're talking about construction services, we've gone away as an organization from part of our and doing it one thorough design. We're actually probably going back to the way because construction services relatively conservative. We did ask HDR to give us, you know, almost a worst case bills for them to do, and similarly, we had a site for. So these hours were very complex project. Pergola, the same. But we intentionally, from a cost perspective, hour, it really comes down to project management, district. Really, their estimate what it's going to be this project. Certainly did it in consideration of some projects that are construction last 5 years. Greatest option.
Thank you, Mr. Heyman. Go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
Yeah, well, with that, my last slide is just what we anticipate project schedule for the gateway to be and how that relates to overall Lake Road. We would expect over the next week or so to be able to get this contract amendment in place, and that would allow work over the summer to break out the bid package. As I mentioned, we have a conditional permit from the district. Doesn't trigger a lot, just erosion control, but we would be working closely with the city of Hopkins to secure the building permits and for the project.
What kind of permits do we need?
From the ones that I'm tracking right now, the pergola structure would require a building permit as footings. We may need a sign permit to say Minnehaha Creek on top of that. We'll probably need a grading permit. We'll need access road permits. But we do intend to meet with city engineering in the next couple of weeks to find out if we have an accurate understanding of the full list of permits or if there's anything to be exploring.
But sign permit you might want to get before you finalize plans,
Yeah, and
because they could alter that.
President White, Manager Loftus, yes.
Yeah.
We do intend, we have several, in the detailed project schedule, we have several iterations of, we'll get nearly final designs, which we'll use for the permitting process. After that goes through, then we have one more chance with HDR to final. So, and then that would put us on track to bid the project in fall, which typically has been a favorable bid time of the year, to construct sometime in spring once construction conditions are appropriate. And again, we're not planning on any major creek construction, so we don't need to be planning for winter construction project. It's mostly up, a lot of cut and fill. While that's going on, that will allow us to take time during the summer and fall to start thinking about any redesign we might need for the main site of Blake Road. And hopefully, again, as Mike mentioned during budget and CIP discussion, hopefully they'll move towards something workable for that.
Let's hold it until he's done.
Yeah, and so with that, I would just ask for the board's consideration on Resolution 25-036, authorization contract with our Blake Road Restoration and Redevelopment Project. Authorize the district administrator to amendments for.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Manager Loftus seconds. Questions? Mr. Sando, Manager Sando.
Yeah, how does the main 325 Blake Road being held on hold right now affect the Gateway project?
Sure. President White, Manager Sando. Not too much. The one area that I could see there being conversation is around construction staging. Initially, the Gateway had, been somewhat considered as a staging ground for construction on the main site, and now we're reversing order. And so we would just need to make sure that we would, we'd have to work with the city and the Lattice to make sure that we have, a clear site and have dealt with any parking issues on the Lake Road site that might prevent us from safely staging construction over there. But we'll be working on a construction staging plan as part of finalizing. Learn more.
Thank you. Manager Olson.
Quick question. Do I recall seeing solid brick walls on either end of the pergola at one time?
President White, Manager Miller.
Olson.
Sorry, Manager Olson. I was trying to
I
rack
don't
my
ask
brain
all the
for. I don't recall that, but perhaps
It was
what
a
you're
matte
recollecting was
panel.
there
We
exactly.
were choosing between them.
Yes,
Matte
there was a
panel that actually had the
vertical.
floor, yeah.
There was a vertical option for that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I prefer this because the view is perfect all the
Yeah.
way around, so.
Yeah, and that was the conversation that we had at the time and landed on that that flat mat.
The other thing is really minor. When you showed the 10%, you didn't have any hours listed as that. So is that 10% tied to non-hours expenses?
President White, Manager Olson. Correct. That 10% is just 10% of the total contract value. And it would depend on what, if we have to tap that contingency, it would depend on exactly what the task is. So different, the hours that we do have allocated, each have a different cost associated with whether or not it's, professional engineer or someone below them or the someone at Damon Farber.
Okay.
So we would find out the exact costs once we kind of know what the task is. I'm sure there's some average we could use to
Okay.
figure out
I follow.
about how many hours that buys us, but
So those are kind of
just a
fixed,
dollar
and that would be a blend of whatever.
exactly.
Thank you.
Manager Sando?
What would be the ideal breaking ground date for this project?
President White, Manager Sando. At this point, the goal would be, early, frost out in spring. I would imagine sometime maybe April of 2026 would be ideal.
I don't know if you can answer this, but would the 325 Blake Road project be more attractive, even more attractive to another developer by having this either being worked on or completed?
I think from our our conversations with all of our development advisors, it sounds like any progress on the site certainly can't hurt. I
Yes.
think developers and everyone likes to see activity and dollars being invested into the site, so they understand that the partners are still.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anything, Manager
Go ahead,
Hajmati?
go ahead, you. Go.
Manager Loftus?
Do you remember talking about letting some sort of art spotlight in the center of that? Is we wait till it's constructed to open that up to whoever might be interested, or are the plans enough to get people interested? I
President
don't know
White,
what you
Manager
think, are you thinking
Loftus.
is a good time on that?
I don't think we should open that up.
No? Okay.
I'll tell you why, because there's community and the city and, the art groups and all that. With all the other issues in the area, we probably shouldn't bring a new one into the mix. That's, if you've ever been involved with art projects, you just, there's a lot of different opinions and stuff that that are expressed that we probably don't need that
Sure.
with all the other.
I don't have experience. I appreciate that
Yeah.
point of view. And I hope at some point more time.
Yeah.
And I might just add from a project design standpoint, the intention of this was, it could stand alone in perpetuity as it's designed. But again, the timing was really to kind of create a blank canvas for policymakers. And so that would be, I think from a technical standpoint, it would work whenever. But the goal was to kind of leave that as flexible as possible, still having to complete.
So definitely not needing to.
It doesn't need to
Or
be.
during construction. We can-
Exactly, and that was, that was part of the thought of not putting something in there that might become a beloved, part of the attraction, and just leave it, if eventually something did go in there, you would just be taking out some low vegetation.
Man,
That is memorialized project
thank you.
now or in the future. Tribes the opportunity here because
Okay.
there was places conversation going on around the light.
Right.
But we did memorialize it in that.
But that's
No requirement.
past our timeline that we're looking at for this part.
Manager Hajmadi?
Yeah, I'm presuming that Hopkins knows about the fact that that we're separating this out and going to be doing this. They know about this, and I don't know if it's ruffled feathers or they're excited about it, or what's happened with that.
President White, Marty, James can speak to the latest conversations, perhaps, but again, in addition, the project agreement, in addition to laying out operations and maintenance obligations, also coordinates our construction process with the city. So, in theory, they were, aware back in 2023 that construction of this could be imminent. And of course, one of the steps that's laid out there is the district initiating a conversation with the city of Hopkins around these permitting issues. The agreement also allows, at Hopkins' discretion, if they would like to attend, any of the construction meetings, or as we get bids in, they have the option to meeting with us and review how those bids are coming in. So sort of, yes, they're aware that this is the plan, but there's also several official steps from that. They'll learn all the details.
We'll provide them notice.
Exactly.
Okay, good. And what about the maintenance and all of that? Does that need to be reviewed with them again, or is that, do they need to be reminded of the fact that this is coming up and we're going to be dividing up the maintenance and so on?
President White, Manager Hajmadi, I think that's a good idea to probably, they should have the exact same version of the agreement we do, but it's probably a good idea to share that with them when we do have our permitting pre-application. And I assume there's some different, we certainly have different maintenance project and maintenance staff on our side now. I imagine they may have had turnover. So I think at least a discussion to make sure that there's surprises.
Right, they were on the same page, Okay, no surprises, because
Any other questions for Mr. Sherman? Those in favor of adopting the resolution, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Are there any board inquiries, issues, or ideas to bring forth this evening? Seeing none, Mr. Whisker, can we have your report?
Certainly. Well, I think as the brief heart-stopping alarm signaled, it's been a pretty active weather week. Just in terms of water levels, since June 2nd, the watershed districts made a whole series of minor upward and downward dam adjustments, sometimes daily, to balance flow in both Minnehaha Creek and levels on Lake Minnetonka. We've seen creek levels have been moderated, and the lake has largely sat around ordinary high water since earlier in May. So we've run a pretty consistent flat OHW as a result of those adjustments. Dam discharge recently, in recent days, has been sitting at a modest 75 cubic feet per second, as we've been watching a lot of volatility in the forecast. Following maybe serendipitously or ominously our flood response summit that we had recently with the county and National Weather Service and all the partners about how we're going to be communicating when things are happening. And I would just say forecasts have shifted significantly all week, from over 3 inches over several days to 2 inches forecasted Thursday, back down to 3/4 of an inch. Yesterday we were going to get 2 inches. Today we wake up this morning, it's less than 8/10. So I say that out loud just because it makes it challenging to make any predictive decisions with the dam. So we've been letting things ride at 75 cubic feet per second to see how the forecasts lock in. I think for a little bit of context here, just knowing that we're looking at a wet weather week ahead, 2 inches have been forecasted this week, which hasn't materialized yet. We're seeing over 2 inches depending on how it comes next week. If you get 2 inches of rain direct down the lake with no inflow, that would raise the lake level 1/10 of a foot, which is pretty significant. Those end up being those 1/10 of a feet end up being hard to move downstream because it's a 1/10 of a foot over 14,000 acres, and those 1/10 of a foot increments are key pegs in what we're doing with dam discharges guided for by the operating plan. So 1 to 2 inches end up becoming things that we pay attention to. Our strategy's been 75 cubic feet per second to slowly release as the forecasts settle in and create some kind of storage, not knowing exactly how much rain we're going to get. For context, against 2 inches, 75 cubic feet per second gains us without inflow 1/100th of a foot per day. So those are kind of your big volume blocks that you're playing with. And 75 is pretty moderate. We can run the dam all the way up to 100, which gets you closer to 400ths. What we've heard from National Weather Service is the forecast dynamics have been driven by this big frontal boundary, this different air pressures, humidities, masses that are moving north, and they haven't quite figured out where is that going to land. Originally, it was going to park on the Iowa border and drop 3 to 5 inches, and it was Duluth, but maybe here. So that's been what's driving a lot of the instability in forecasts and National Weather Service adjustments. Meanwhile, like I said, they're predicting rain through next week, little bits, a lot in one day. I saw one of the weather aggregators just yesterday predicting 4.6 inches on Tuesday. That was quickly downgraded to 4. Now we're in the 2-inch range. So you can just get a sense for how volatile the weather patterns are over this week and next. And I guess
Can I ask
just
a question on that?
sure thing.
There's a lot of adjustments in the staffing of these various services. And there was a big move 4 years ago to privatize the weather service with a vendor that currently serves the farm market. And it, watching the weather forecast, they seem to be missing a lot of accuracy lately all over the country. And I'm just wondering if that's new weather patterns or staffing.
That's a great question, Manager Miller. I don't know that, maybe it's a little bit of both, but in our experience, what we've been doing is we're not just watching the digital forecasts, and we have a tight relationship with Chanhassen National Weather Service office. So I've been getting 15-minute daily briefings in the morning. A gentleman comes in, got a good relationship with him, super sharp. They're interpreting what the overnight forecasters have pulled out of the model. And what's just really interesting is it's just very, very unstable right now, atmospheric conditions, and it's making it almost impossible with them happening, and things are going to evolve very quickly in 6 hours. So at least for this week or so, it has more to do with what's happening in the air, anything to do with predictions at National Weather Service. And when we've met with them, we've obviously had those conversations. Water cooler chatter of like what's going on with your agency since you're federal. And I think generally what we've heard is anything that has a whiff of climate has been gone. Anything that's weather and storm related and forecasting related preserved. And I guess other curiosities is they're housing a whole variety of other federal agency staff that have nothing to do with the National Weather Service in a bricks and mortar building. So they're fielding a lot of requests on the phone from people, agency and that. So there is some turmoil, but I don't think it's actually affecting the forecast.
Thank you.
So yeah, we have been getting daily briefings, and I think as of this morning, we're just sitting up at attention and watching closely. James has been sending me updates just on storms that are moving through Hutchinson, because when we're looking at anywhere from 1 to 7 inches in a 5-day window, it could be nothing, or it could happen very quickly, and we could have to make significant back and forth adjustments on the dam and issue communications. So right now, we're sitting okay with lake level. We've created some storage. Dam discharge and evap have brought the lake below OHW of 929.4. We're sitting at around 929.29, 929.3, so about a 1/10 below OHW. If you look on it, because I know a lot of you do and the public do, the gauge is reading less than that because the winds are pushing water west and the gauge is in the east. have winds out of the west, we see fluctuation in the gauge, it stacks up. It's going the other way, it sucks the water away from the gauge, and you can get 5/100ths or 1/10 of a foot swing in gauge readings just from wind, which is an added complication. Creek downstreams, also relatively moderate. Last 36 hours flows of equalized discharge, so they're sitting around 80 CFS. And we've seen 400 to 600 cubic feet in the creek, so we kind of have storage in both locations. We're sitting okay, depending on what the weather. I think that we've done the best that we can to balance the scales without acting too rashly and within the management plan. So current forecast for tomorrow, just less than 1/10 of an inch throughout the day. If we got that, we would come back up to something like 538, closer to OHW. Next week's forecast, Sunday through Tuesday, could be 2 to 3 inches. That would push us closer to 926, which is maximum discharge. You can see we're kind of on opposite ends of low discharge 75 all the way up to potential to discharge 250, 300 just by next. So that's kind of the current situation. We have the storage, the weather's crazy, and we'll react. Questions about that? Yeah, turn your weather alerts off because you're going to give staff panic attacks, or at least me. A couple of other things. You were tracking some of the Lake Improvement District dialogue that's been happening. I think the Orono Council meeting was this week, Monday or Tuesday. I forget which day they hold them on. They maybe.
Monday, yeah.
And they voted to support. That was unanimous, mostly voices of support. I think that's kind of how that shook out for the Stubbs Bay Lake Improvement District. And then last but not least, James O'Brien recently provided a presentation on our behalf to the Minnesota Department of, was there a question on that? Sorry. Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs Sustainability Work Group. We've done some work with the Vets Home before for board members that have been around a while. So James was able to cover our best urban ecology planning philosophy, past work with the Vets Home, ongoing work in Minneapolis, which they seem excited about. We were joined by park board reps, I think, who talked about improvements to the falls and the Glen. James said presentation was well received. Work group appreciates the context. They're excited about Minneapolis, and I know James himself was happy to be there, make the presentation as an Army vet himself. So it's kind of, happy to get our outreach staff out in the community supplementing everybody else telling our story. So that's what we have for the admin report.
Thank you very much. Anything else? Then we can just take a short break while we prepare to go into the next items. Mr. Smith, would you state the reason for the closed sessions?
Madam President? Madam President, we would recommend that the Board of Managers go into closed session for the purpose of receiving confidential legal advice concerning litigation strategy concerning 2 matters. The first is Alatus versus Minnehaha Creek Watershed District in the city of Hopkins. And the second concerns a complaint from JTS Construction against the district concerning the Minnehaha.
So moved.
There's a motion, is there a second? Manager Sandos seconds. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're in closed session. We are in open session. The meeting is adjourned.